just as a reminder, we have some more Lightning Talk slots. The paper is downstairs if you want to sign up. And now I give the floor to Pierre Nicoli, who will talk us about what's new in CSS in 2023.
Ciao all, it's me again. Talking theming again. How original. So, this is a talk that's entirely CSS related, not Plone related, maybe a little. So I expect everyone to want a colorful experience, right? So that's why I started with the black and white slide. In fact, if this wasn't the most colorful presentation of the conference, I would be very offended by my own skills. So, you know, CSS. So that's why actually the first slide would be this one, because why not? But before talking colors, which is one of the topics, let's start seriously with a few, with a little agenda. So we're going to talk about a lot of things, actually. This is mostly a compilation of new things that happened in the last year or so, and that are stable in most browsers or almost. And if they are not, they're going to be soon, we hope. So it's things that I think could be worth keeping an eye on. First topic would be new responsive thingies. And I'm going to start with the oldest of the new things. And in browser technology years, container queries are old because they're 1 year or so old. They're available in all major browsers. They actually power, I think, some of the things in the new components that Victor told about, or in their theme. I don't know. Victor is using these somewhere. And this is something very interesting because it actually is something similar to the good old media queries. They actually allow you to query the parent element size and style to determine the styles which should be applied to any of its children. What does it mean? That this thing allows easier nested layouts and an easier collocation of code, which is a good friend of the separation of concern I was talking about this morning. This is because you can, if you're writing components, and you probably are if you're working with Plone 6, you are also writing styles for the component, and you can adapt the styles of the component based on the container size without caring where they are used. Let's see an example of this. So this is an email client, and this is what happens with container queries. See, for example, the time on the right that it's disappearing. So there's basically 2 of these at the beginning, and the favorites and the primary. And they are, let me play that again. Yeah. So the favorites are small, the primary is big. The dates, the time disappears on the right, then it appears on both. And yeah, and that's no media query for every specific thing. That's a container query on the items, on the table, let's call it like that. And it adapts automatically. So let's see an example of how we could write that in CSS. Animations, because I forgot to remove them. So yeah, like this. Okay. So there's this new CSS thing. You have to define a row to be a container. And there are a couple of different options there. The inline sizes will take care of considering the container and the container's width for languages that are left to right, and height for the other ones that are top to bottom or vertical. And the container query there will take care of applying those styles only when the container of the items is for example, 500 pixels wide. And that's an amazing new thing. It's can really be helpful for dashboards or whatever component you have which has a lot of data in it that you might want to rearrange based on the page, on the viewport size or the page size. So tied to container queries are style queries, which is actually something in addition to container queries. And it's experimental compared to the baseline container queries, and allows you to check for a CSS custom property value for applying container styles. So all those examples on the right-hand side can be built with containers style queries like this one. And it can have some use cases, in my opinion. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, most of the things we're going to see today is things you could do before. It's just simpler with the new technology. So this is, of course, was doable before. Next, I have another big one, which is the has selector, which is the parent selector. We wanted this for a long time. And now we can use it. Except Firefox is still working on having it as stable, but we can start using it, in my opinion, of course, until it's stable everywhere, maybe for progressive enhancement situations, but it will be there, that's for sure. And the API is stable for that. So basically what's going to happen is it doesn't look like a parent selector because it's much more than that. So you can apply styles to elements that contain the specified selector, and by selector I mean any selector. So that allows you to go crazy with that. And a simple example is this here. You could have gray background to items that have a star. So if the item contains something that has the star class, also have the, please have the gray background. Or you can have the title in a bold font weight if the item contains a star. So you get let me show an example for this. So if my item, that's the row there, has a star, its title should be bold. And this is to show you how you can do a slightly crazier thing than just selecting parents. For example, going back to this example, to this thing here, you could say the background is light blue if there's a checked item, if there's a checked input in there, and so on and so forth. And this is as simple as that, and that's actually one of my favorite of the new goodies that we have. Yeah. On to the next one. Next one is going to be the new additions to the nth. They call it the nth of selectors. It's actually an addition to the nth child selectors. It adds functionality to the nth child selector. So basically, the nth child selector is a selector for, well, the nth child of an element. And with the new addition, you can sort of filter those childs and then select the second, for example. And I'll show you an example in a moment. It also applies to the nth last child selector. Basically, this is a display of, I don't know, album covers. The ones with the staff pick label, the yellow one, have the highlight class in their CSS, in their HTML markup. And the staff peak label is applied via the highlight class. But what do we want to do? We want to show the difference of the, like the nth child. The second child would be the green one, so the second one from the top. While if you select with this new addition, you can select the second highlighted child of this list of items. And that's as simple as that. So the first example is CSS that would select the second item of the list if it's highlighted. While the second example is, I want, of the list of childs, I want the ones that are highlighted, and I want the second one. So that's why you get the pink one to be actually the sixth child. And this one is also quite powerful, and with the nth last child, you can go from the bottom up. Okay, and this is also already implemented in the newest versions of all major browsers. So this is quite neat, in my opinion. Next one is something less stable for now, but worth mentioning, in my opinion. It's the text wrap balancing. So text wrap balancing, let me show you the video. Yeah, it's just that. It balances the length of the lines of the text you add this to, and it allows for neater layouts. You know, the classic landing page situation where you want the title to be well balanced among 2 or 3 lines, and you add the BR HTML element to just carry it where you want to, for example, or this just helps. It has a limit of 4 lines or 6, depending on the source you find. I found different versions of this. I'm not sure, but the latest one I found was 4, so I'll go with 4. And that's for performance reasons. So they limit this to being text with 4 lines. It's just ignored if the text is longer. And it's there for titles and such. It's a nice progressive enhancement, and that's why I mentioned it, even if it's not really stable. Another interesting one that's also a nice progressive enhancement nowadays is the initial letter new CSS key. So you can style for example, the first letter of a paragraph using this example CSS here. And it has 2 values, which is the number of lines it should span in height. And the second one, the 3, is the offset, which means, let me show you the video here where it toggles a little things, which means how many lines it should be. So yeah, the offset in height, let's call it that. And that has probably fewer use cases, but I actually find this very interesting, and it's also probably non-breaking if it doesn't work on the user's browser yet. So it's a nice progressive enhancement, in my opinion. Okay, next one is a more important one. I'm sure some of you have fought with the problem of viewport height units, and also sometimes viewport width. Especially on mobile, you could have this issue that when browser toolbars appear, the viewport height is not adapted as a final value. So things that are 100 viewport height actually go below the screen when the top toolbar appears, or are actually hidden by the bottom toolbar. It depends depending on the device and the browser and such. Dynamic viewport units are something that help you with that. There are three kinds of dynamic viewport units. So the first one is small viewport height and width, which is SVH and SVW. It is the smallest active viewport size. That means if every toolbar is showing, that's the viewport height I'm interested in. That's a fixed value, so the browser knows how much that value would be in the moment that all toolbars are showing. And you can use that. There's also the large viewport height and width, which is the opposite. So what's the largest possible viewport size? And the browser knows. And then there's probably the one that will be the most used one. That's the dynamic viewport height and width. And this means the actual value that's used by the browser is, it changes when toolbars become visible or when they become hidden. There's only one thing that is not taken into consideration by the browser, which is the virtual keyboard. And I think it's fine, because when you tap something like a form and you want to write, you don't want the page to shrink and move around because the keyboard showed up. The keyboard overlays, you write, and then it disappears. So I have a visual example for all of these. This one. So the left one, the leftmost one, the green one, is the smallest, the small viewport size. So that's as an example. That has the top toolbar for navigation, well, for the address, and the bottom toolbar, for example. And that's the height that it would have if all toolbars are showing. So if the user scrolls, that value that's used by the browser, that doesn't change, in case you need it. Same applies to the blue one, the second from the left, which is the opposite. So the largest viewport size, that's the viewport size when nothing is showing from the browser, for the browser toolbars. And then there's an example with the dynamic, which is when showing the small one, when not showing the big one. Browsers do this math for you nowadays. That's one I like actually a lot. Okay. On to another one. There are a few. So you might have seen. Let's go back to colors. So colors are increasingly important nowadays in designs and in our job as a consequence. At least I'm talking about mine, which is the developer's job. It's increasingly important to be able to represent more colors. And I'm sure you have noticed also today in some of the previous talks, like the talk from Ramon, the talk from Victor, colored titles. Like the topmost, like the bar that I have at the top of the slides with animated colors or very vivid colors. This is something that we can do in the browser as well nowadays. So we now have access to additional color spaces. They have a wider gamut than the one that we are used to. So the number of colors that we can represent are available now for the web as well. And you are also already used to that because you have seen beautiful photography with those vivid colors. And you have seen already websites that use this in a lot of situations. You have probably stumbled upon the Next.js or Remix or Apple website, just to mention a few. They use all those vivid colors, and you don't necessarily realize, but you have that. Sometimes, at least that happens to me, to think, wow, these colors are like, they stand out. You really notice that. And so as a small example here that I'll translate to the next, I'll show in the next slide as well. The color space that we're used to is the smallest one in the right picture, the red one. That's the classic RGB, more or less, color space. And the other ones are, those ones, the other four ones there, are quite bigger, but bigger compared to what could be the question there. That's actually, those are actually triangles in this space on the left. The space there on the left is the common, what we usually represent the colors that are available, that our eyes can see. We usually represent with this kind of thing, of, I don't know, horseshoe, something. It has a name, I forgot it. Could be horseshoe something, it doesn't matter. So the whole colored areas there is what your eyes can see. And the area inside the triangle on the left side is the one that RGB colors in the browser can represent. And my first thought when I came upon this was like, I thought I was fine with the colors I had. They were like 16 million colors. So it's not like 65,000 from when I was a kid. It's like 16 million colors, right? It's a lot. It's everything I need. Yeah, except it's not true anymore. And so that's the triangles there on the right-hand side are actually a space. You could translate them. Actually, I could have done that, but I didn't. So imagine that you translate those triangles onto this area. You get a much bigger range of colors that you can represent there. Let me show you an example of a video. So I'm going to play it in a moment. I couldn't have a bigger preview, and I'm sorry about that, but on the bottom left of the video, you have a preview of that shape and the triangles. So that there is a video showing a few pictures. If you change the available range of colors, and you can see what happens. This won't be perfect because this is a presentation on a screen. It's not on your laptop screen, but I'm sure you will still see some difference in how vivid the blue and the white and the yellow are. And for example, because it's an example most of us have seen, in the past 5 or 6 years, Apple has been very good with their default backgrounds with vivid colors. And this is just an example of the difference. I mean, you can work with the old 16 million colors stuff and do great things and still have something to it, but this will look different. So, going a little more technical into this, the title there is Wide Gamut Color Spaces. A color space is a mapping of colors. It's how you arrange colors if you had a mathematical shape, a geometric shape for colors. And actually, there are geometric shapes for colors, spaces for colors. And that also specifies the syntax you use to specify a color. You have used RGB, I'm sure of that, and that's 3-dimensional, right? And you have used HSL, I'm sure. And also, it's also 3 dimensions, but it doesn't work the same way, and I'm going to show you in a second. The color gamut, on the other hand, is the range of colors. So when we talk about a wider color gamut, we're talking about how wide the triangle from before was, so the number of representable colors. The color space is actually how you write that color. So an example of color spaces is this one. I'm not going really deep into the complex ones, but just to clarify the naming. So the RGB was actually a cube, right, more or less. And it's 3-dimensional. Also, the HSL is what I showed is how it works, because you have the hue around it, saturation, and the value. It's a different way of representing colors, and it's a matter of convention and mathematics, and I'm not good at mathematics, but it's how you, in the end, have to write colors. Well, not like this, but with numbers and triplets. So let me show you an example of how to use an advanced color space. So display P3 is one of the most used. I don't know why, because it's not even one of the biggest. There could be a reason at some point, but I don't know. But still, this is how you, every one is written like that. So the color function allows you to specify the color space you want to use and the values. There are two notations for that, as it was for HSL, I think, as well. And that's it. And most browsers work now with, well, all latest version of all major browsers work with these nowadays. And if you want to be more, if you want to be safer with the use of these colors, there's also checks you can have, media queries and support queries for this. So with these kind of media queries, you can check if you have a high dynamic range, if you have high dynamic range capabilities, and if you have the P3 specific color space available, because you might not have all of the available color spaces, which are, the new ones are actually a lot, like more than 7, I think. I only showed 4 earlier, but it's a lot more. And on the other hand, you can see if the browser version also supports the specific notation with the supports check, the third one. So you can actually be much more inclusive with browsers with these checks. And also you can combine those in something like this. And so yeah, you can have support queries inside media queries just to be completely safe. And so if it makes sense, use the P3 color space. Otherwise, RGB is fine. You can see an example of this in the, I checked in the Chrome DevTools. I'm not sure about Firefox. It could have it as well. So if you write, yeah, the background is darker than on my laptop, but there's a display P3 color back there in the background. And if you check the color space with the, actually the color palette, the color table there, you can see a white line showing where's the limit of the RGB space and what are the extra colors you have access to, and you can fiddle with that. And I really like this one because it's not 100% needed, but the websites actually do look better. Also let your designer fellows know that this is available now when you're ready to use it. Otherwise, they might not know and keep using RGB, and why not? This is good. As an addition to this, there's now the color mix function that you can use instead of simple colors in CSS. So this allows to mix colors and create new values based on the colors that you input. So you specify you tell the function the color space you want to use and the colors that you want to mix. This might look cumbersome because you are mixing blue and white and getting a whole lot of different results. But that's based on the representation of blue and white in that specific color space. So that's math happening inside this color mix function. And some of you might ask me, why would I care about this when I want a specific color? Because there's actually a good answer for that, because this is the solution to the problem most of us have been using preprocessors like SAS and LS4. Well, not only for that one, but that means changing the transparency level of colors, like this. Because if you mix a color with a transparent, non-fully opaque color, you get lighter version of the color. And that means that you can create color palettes dynamically without preprocessor. Yes, if you use CSS, you can create a function and write 3 lines of code instead of 10. But whatever. So this is an example. That's what you get. And that's a perfect color palette for most situations. And you don't have to, you do that in the browser, you change that with CSS custom properties. It's a lot more dynamic than using preprocessors. And it's going to be interesting. It's really going to be interesting. So yeah. Next I have the some changes to how CSS works, and not related to responsive and colors, but related to its foundations. This is also an attack on the preprocessors, to the preprocessors plane. And this is because nesting is now in CSS. And by nesting, I mean this. This is CSS that is working in all major browsers nowadays. And you don't need SCSS for this anymore. You can use the ampersand in all ways you use that for SCSS. It's not perfectly working in all browsers, but the majority of the situations and of the use cases are covered. And there's one known issue that Chrome is fixing that Firefox doesn't have. You have to use the ampersand at the beginning with Chrome anytime if you are starting with a element selector. So the only thing I could not write there is div inside card. That wouldn't work in Chrome. But if you do ampersand space div, that would work. And we can live with that, I believe. Also, you can nest container queries inside selectors, like on the right-hand side. This is quite handy. After nesting, I have another big one that I briefly mentioned this morning. Cascade layers. So CSS now allows to have more control over cascading in your style sheet. And so basically, nowadays, you have the user agent styles applying, the styles that you write, so your style sheet applies, and then the important styles in your style sheet apply. With the cascade layers, you get more control because you can add any number of layers there, specifically you add any number of layers you want in number 2 and number 5. So that means that it's not 5. You can have 3 extra layers before unlayered styles. And I have an example for that. And let's see it. So this is a 2-column text because I want it to be readable. So first line would be defining the layer order. What does that mean? And after the first line where I define the layer orders, which is base, typography, and utils, I define the styles for these 3 layers. And no matter the specificity of the selectors inside the layers, they will always be applied in layer order. And inside the layer, the regular specificity that we know will apply. So for example, here I have, and I have the result also in the next slide. Here I have in my base layer, I am styling all the links with the red color, all the links with the link class in blue, and then I have all the links in the typography layer will be green, And if I didn't have these layers, the link class would apply always, even if the A anchor tag is specified later. But we will see how, in this situation, actually, it doesn't matter if the link it doesn't matter if the link class is specified to be blue, because it's applied in the first layer, and then you apply the typography layer above it, and the links are green, unless they have the pink classes, so they become pink. And why is this useful? Because we have to integrate stuff. We have to integrate. We are a world of integrators as well, as not only developers. So you integrate third-party libraries or add-ons in our case. And what if all the core styles of Volto had a core layer and all add-ons that you have in your site had an add-on layer, and your theme had a theme layer? Also no layer, because as we saw, the styles with no layer are applied later on. So that would remove some of the conflicts that you might have. That will make it easier to also understand and work on and maintain CSS code. And as an example, you can swap the layers and you can turn them around, and the color of the links would change. Because if you change the layer ordering, that's the first definition of the layers in the first line, then the order changes. And the selectors did not. The order in which they are written did not change. You just told the browser to apply them with a different order. I like this one. Moving on. You know how transform properties are complex? You have to write a lot of things. Not anymore. Nowadays, you can write the separate parts of the transform property like this, and it works. It just works. And this is also very, very useful when you have hover effects, focus, whatever changes the transforms. You don't have to rewrite everything like in this example. And last, and kind of extra, because it's mostly JavaScript, but I really wanted to tell you about this, and are view transitions. So view transition are a little experimental. I would not necessarily recommend you to use this as opposed to the previous ones. But to keep an eye on these, yes, they are one of the most hyped topics for 2023. And it allows behaviors like this one, which is kind of nice and helpful for communicating the flow of your application to the user. This is also something that was doable earlier on, but I'm going to show you in more or less how many lines of code it takes to get the thumbnail animation there. It does only work in SPAs today, because it needs JavaScript to handle the DOM change. And how it works, very simply, is it takes a screenshot of the page before the transition, so before the DOM update, and then it crossfades elements. You apply view transition name to HTML elements. It crossfades them from the screenshot it took and the situation after the transition. This is the core of the code needed to do that. So you apply the view transition name, and there's one caveat here. No view transition name duplicates are allowed, so I could not have all thumbnails with the same view transition name. It doesn't work if you do that. But you can apply the view transition name to the clicked element, Start view transition is the keyword here. Inside the start view transition function, you update the DOM, and the browser does the trick. That's basically it. It has quirks, it has caveats, but it's experimental, as I said. But that's the goal. And this is the code that powers this example. So actually, there are several other transitions happening here, but a whole talk and presentation could be done on this, but I want it to be the simplest possible situation. See how other transition happen, like it moves from left to right and stuff. Those are all different transitions, but all of them are as simple as those few lines of code and similar stuff. And yeah, this is related to CSS because you can use CSS to control the animations, but it's mostly JavaScript, but I really wanted to show you that. There are other things that I left out of this presentation, either because they were really experimental or less useful in my opinion, but all of the things can be found at that page. That link there is an article with a whole lot of new things that happened in the last years, and these examples as well. And yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you, Piero, for your talk. Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah, don't wait. Wait.
Microphone.
How do you see the future of preprocessors like SCSS when CSS making such big advances?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think it's a matter of personal preference. I started using preprocessors less and less in the last few years. I still do use them. They're useful for using those kind of things with older browsers nowadays. And preprocessors, in my opinion, are going to be less used, and they're still going to be used for building like CSS frameworks. Like heavy usage of preprocessors is done nowadays, for example, to build the CSS from Bootstrap that you use. And that's because functions and ifs and stuff that's more powerful. That can write a lot of CSS with very few lines.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Oh, yeah.
About browser support.
Yep.
So you mentioned a few of the stuff there are not supported on Firefox.
Yep.
You haven't mentioned the other ones. I guess they support it.
Edge is on the same page as Chrome on everything. Safari also, unless I mentioned Chrome only, Safari was like this one.
Yeah, okay.
Safari was good.
So
anyways.
question is do you observe a kind of tendency of Chrome to push for new things and trying to leave the other behind?
Yes, Chrome implements a lot of things that are still experimental. And then they advertise that it's ready, but it's not really. But I mean, it's working in their browser, and eventually they will have probably some advantage. Not sure. That's their policy. That's what they do.
Okay.
I really like that idea about the layering of CSS rules for the add-ons and for the base and the CMS. How far along are you in your company with this idea? Did you already implement it?
No, actually, no.
So we need
yeah, not at all.
But did you test it? How good it is? How feasible would it be to implement it?
So I'm not sure it's super easy, because that's more of a community agreement to use the same naming for CSS layers.
Yeah.
And I'm not, the only thing that I thought could be difficult is the way Razzle and Webpack bundle all the CSS, the different CSS that you have, and output for the HTML page. So I'm not entirely sure how easy it is. I'm sure that it's not super easy.
Okay, but I mean, it sounds amazing.
It's
and
promising,
we need,
but
yeah,
yeah.
and we need a concrete action plan for it.
Okay, thank you.